All right, we're live. Ben Nichols. Thank you for joining me, man. Yeah, I'm excited to really just hear your story and then what you've been working on, really helping grow an emerging sport here, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the fastest growing sport in the world. Yeah,
Yeah.
Ben, thanks for being here and being willing to come on.
Thanks, Joe. Pleasure. Great to connect and great to be on the show and look forward to talk.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'd love to really just to start to just to get a bit of your background because I know that you've got an interesting story just from the anti-doping,
Yeah.
working in anti-doping in Russia, and sounds like you've been in sports comm for a bit and have done some great things. So, yeah, would love for you just to share the brief story maybe of what's gotten you to this
Yeah.
point.
Sure. So I'm I've been in the industry, sports marketing and PR industry for about 20 odd years now. I grew up in the UK as a tennis and squash player and always wanted to work in sport. And I early on I wanted to be a sports journalist and loved writing and loved the commentary and the color that went with sport. And then sort of saw that that kind of journalism world was slowly dying a little bit in some respects. So I took the plunge to work more on the marketing and PR side of things. And I've been lucky enough along the way to work as press officer of the Dubai Tennis Championships, ATP and WTA event in Dubai for a couple of years. I worked in Formula One for one of the teams in England as head of communications, head of press there. It's the team that's now called Alpine, but was then called Lotus Renault. And then I spent 4 years of my life working for the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, who are headquartered in Montreal, Canada. And it was a fascinating 4 years, totally different experience, much more on the regulatory policy. They were the watchdog for doping in sport, so a really sensitive, tough kind of issue to deal with. And we had a big mandate as an organization to crack down on doping, to manage the issue, to manage athletes' rights and promote fair play and integrity in sport. And I arrived there in 2013, just off the back of the Armstrong and U.S. postal scandal that had kind of rocked sport. Thinking, it's not going to get kind of juicier than that in terms of media topics. And then lo and behold, with the Russia file came along, and there was a whole, state-supported doping story that came out, as I'm sure you might have seen in the movie Icarus and New York Times and all the media that were covering that. So it was a really challenging, tough, rewarding time to be working for a great organization, that have been tasked with trying to manage a massive issue of cheating in sport. And we would as a team come into the office thinking, look, you couldn't make this stuff up. I mean, it was just one kind of dramatic issue after another, and my job was to manage be the front line, managing the media interest in it. So being a spokesperson and putting across the organization's point of view with on a topic that wasn't just in the back pages, it was on the front pages. So it was a really amazing, and challenging time to be working in sport.
Sure. So what? And I'm really just curious about that. Like, how did you get into that in the first place? Were you interested in that, or did somebody kind of make an introduction for you? Because that's, yeah, probably a big left turn from what you're doing
Yeah, I
before that.
asked myself the same question actually, but it was one of those. I worked in the happier side of sport, promoting sport, all the fun stuff that went with it, and that's where you work in sport. I think by and large is just the uplifting, positive side of life, really. And I look really kind of long story short, I had been headhunted for a role, which was to head up media for WADA, and I went through a recruitment process. This is way back in kind of 2011 time. I was pretty young then, and I thought, maybe I'm a bit too early for this. I might not get the role, but I went through it, and I got pretty much the last couple of people. Didn't get the role. Stayed in touch with the organization because I always thought I'd love to work for them. They had a really interesting role they're playing. And then lo and behold, a couple of, the moral of the story here is stay in touch with people because, I was in touch with them, and then out of the blue, they said we might have an opportunity. I met with them again. This is a couple of years on. And so it happened. There was an opening for me to go and take on that similar role that I'd originally applied for. I was living in London. It actually, person had just met, just got engaged to my wife. I just bought a house. It was all these things. I was like, the timing is not right this time. But then I kind of thought, well, when is the timing ever perfect? And all these things are surmountable. We can move to Canada. that we can rent out our apartment and we can go and have this, great experience and adventure. So moved there. And to answer your question directly, yeah, why? Look, I built up a skill set and experience in the communications, media relations side of sport. So that's the link. It's an organization that's in sport. Obviously, it's tackling doping, but yeah, for sure, it's a different side. It's governmental, it's policy, it's about athlete rights, it's science, medicine, legal. It's a hugely like heavy topic and organization to go and work for. So I knew when I did it, I said, look, I've got the skill set here. What I don't know is I'm not a specialist on science. I'm not a specialist on banned substances. I'm not a specialist on the legal side of, the athlete rights, etc. I'm going to have to like absolutely immerse myself in this job and get up to speed, read a lot, speak to people. So I just, I got the role. I kind of embraced it and made sure I spoke to as many people. Again, did all those things, read up, understood the rules, understood the world of doping in sport. And to be honest, no one comes from that world. You had, the top brass coming from like a legal background, and they're from the legal sector. You had people coming from science and medicine. So everyone was coming from these different worlds into this organization, tasked with a great remit to create a level playing field in sport as much as is possible. So we were all learning off each other, if I'm honest. And I think that was a massively valuable 4 years. So look, long answer to your question, but there's no training for that to get into it. It's like quite a new sector, doping in sport. Anti-doping, it didn't really exist 30, 40 years ago. There was no WADA before, I want to say in 1999, around then. So, we were all coming from different angles, tasked with a shared mission.
Hmm. Well, interesting background, man. Yeah, I don't know that I've ever come across somebody that's worked in anti-doping or just been involved in that. So, and the Lance Armstrong thing, I remember how big of a deal that was. I growing up. So
Well,
that, yeah.
and just on that, actually, yeah, it's interesting the timing because, like I said, I came in. It was just after the Armstrong, like the official file had come out, and the Oprah Winfrey interview, and all of that had played out. And then, a year or two later, the Russia thing came down the track, and it was, as you and many people in sport will know, it led to a massive like international investigation into doping in sport with the Sochi Olympics. It led to a lot of bans and sanctions and athlete uproar over it. It led to a Hollywood movie, Icarus, for anyone that's interested about the whole saga, and it's kind of a story that you just couldn't make up. So the repercussions and the knock-on effects were huge, and it took anti-doping and doping in sport to a whole new level of like public consciousness. So I think, it's a fascinating kind of world, and look, you're never gonna eradicate doping. That's just not realistic. People will cheat in any walk of life, but if WADA wasn't there and the anti-doping bodies weren't there, then it could be a bit of a free-for-all. So we were there to like minimize, an issue that people, the public don't want to see it by and large.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. It's a good backstory, and then kind of what you're up to today. This is really what I'd love to talk to you about. The sweatshirt you're wearing right now, the Paddle Club. For my audience, I'm not sure if people would be familiar with paddle or just kind of what the story is, and that it is one of the fastest, again, if not the fastest growing sport in the world. So what led you to what you're doing now with paddle and then founding Paddle 22? Would love to hear that story.
For sure. So I grew up, as I mentioned, playing racket sports, playing a lot of squash and tennis. And so I always had, that's kind of always like, first love was I love racket sports. What led me to paddle? So after WADA, I moved back to the UK and I spent several years working with some Olympic federations, some Olympic and Paralympic athletes. I was then doing a contract with the LTA, which is the tennis federation, like the USTA in the UK. And they also happen to govern paddle, being a racket sport. So the US is different, where you've got a separate paddle and tennis federations. But in the UK, you've got the tennis federation running paddle. I was doing a contract with them, and then part of my remit was to look after PR for the British paddle team. And at that time, I was coming to the end of my contract, so I had the very like practical, real life need of what's my next job and where's my next paycheck coming from. And as a freelancer, you're always thinking that step ahead. And I was also immersed in kind of just meeting a lot of people. This is 2022, meeting a lot of people who were investing in the sport, who were setting up paddle courts and clubs, who were creating apparel companies like what I'm wearing today, and racket manufacturers. So there's this whole kind of like sort of prison of energy, I guess, around the sport and excitement from investors. And I just thought I really want to work in this sport. It's being talked about in the media as the next big thing. It's kind of like where pickleball probably was in the US 3 years ago. And I thought the obvious place to work in it is to, there's going to be a lot of businesses that need to grow their profiles and market themselves. Set up my own company, which is what Paddle 22 became. And yeah, we set it up, very much kind of bootstraps and just ran with it and created a what is now a PR marketing company, and was the first worldwide to become a paddle specific, certainly in the new paddle markets, a paddle specific marketing and PR company. And we work today successfully working with some great clubs in the US, UK, and other places. Professional leagues. We're working with we work with players. We work with technology companies, and I could talk more about this, like Playtomic, which is the big booking app.
Hmm.
Uh, and yeah, we're working with a lot of the leaders in the sport, and we're helping educate people around the sport at the same time. So we're building the plane and flying it. And yeah, it's been a lot of hard work, but it's really exciting. It's essentially the first time in my life and many people's lives where you're sort of working in this new quote unquote sport, which is growing in real time.
Yep. Yep. So I was checking it out on your website. There's a report. I forget exactly the name of it, but it kind of details everything behind paddle, from the investment aspect that you talked about, from the social media to some of the celebrities like Eva Longoria that's involved in it. It's pretty cool. But
Yeah,
how much has social media impacted? It sounded like in that report that's like a huge driving force of it, and partnering with different influencers. So has that been just a huge driver of the sport to
yeah,
this point?
yeah, massive. Like from our own kind of job point of view, we have to come at it from every angle. Mainstream media. We have to think about like events for clubs, how you can get people excited in person playing the sport. We have to think about social media and content creators, and for sure, there's a whole massive scene emerging of people that just the one thing about paddle, people are hugely obsessed with playing. It's like we call it the sticky sport. People, you get on court, and I'm sure Joe, when you do soon, you will be wanting to get back. It is really like nothing else I've ever seen. So you get these celebrities, you get people with all walks of life that go on court and they just have to keep coming back. It's like a healthy drug. And I think you're seeing a lot of celebrities, like they could be ex-athletes, but like you see in the US, a lot of ex-tennis players and people playing pickleball. You're seeing that mirrored across the rest of the world, but it's paddle. So you're getting ex-athletes and current athletes getting on court and just playing paddle and becoming hugely obsessed. You're getting other celebrities doing it, and you're getting general content creators who just want to get on court, want to show their enthusiasm to the Instagram world. It's becoming, like I say, an obsession, a kind of a cultural phenomenon in many countries, that's like sticking into people's lives, where they'll go to work, they'll go home, and their new third place is the paddle club. So it's something which might be novel to a lot of people in the States, because it is very much at its infancy. But for anyone listening, I would say strap in, because it's going to be huge. I think arguably it could be as big, if not bigger, than pickleball, and it's just come about in a slower way in the US. Perhaps because the attention's been on pickleball, but it's going to come in a big way, because just the ease with which you can play paddle, super easy to pick up compared to tennis, squash, golf, and other more technical sports. And it's intimate. You've got four players on a court. You have a lot of laughter, banter. There's a lot of every point. Pretty much every player will be involved. So there's a huge amount going for it. It's very social. People are staying for drinks and beers or whatever afterwards. So it's become a real kind of lifestyle, I suppose.
Hmm.
And this is where it's interesting, is it's not just sporty people playing and athletic people. It's people that haven't got any rackets background that can and do keep coming back.
Great. So I definitely want to get in the weeds with you a little bit and just learn about some of that from the investment side and the real estate and everything. But let's just take a step back for somebody who's listening.
Yeah.
What is paddle? If they never heard of it,
We went
it'd be a
straight
good place to start. Yeah.
Paddle is, I'm going to say it, the world's fastest growing sport. Not yet the US is, but I think it's going to be up there soon. And it is a cross between squash and tennis. It's played on a court which has glass and mesh wire walls, essentially, and it's like a miniature tennis court. So it's I want to say about the third the size of a tennis court. And yeah, like I say, a cross between squash and tennis. So you play 99% of people play doubles. You can play singles, but for the sake of this conversation, let's talk about doubles. So you have four people on a court. It's tennis scoring. It's an underarm serve, cross court to your opponent. And yeah, you have to, essentially, you have to utilize the walls as best you can. Players will move. Generally, good paddle player, it will be people moving forward in waves, like as partners. They move forward together, move back together. There's a lot of lobbing. You'll get tennis players can naturally pick it up, but they're not so comfortable with the walls. You'll get squash players not so good at the net, but they're very happy using the walls. And it's a very kind of dynamic game. I'd say it's quite kind of chess like. So there's kind of in any rally you might get fast moments, slow moments, quite cat and mouse. It's quite crafty, and it's huge, like I say, hugely engaging and addictive. It's just like whilst you can pick it up very quickly, and that's one asset the sport has. Takes a long time to master. So it's kind of easy to learn, hard to master, which is great because there's a long lifespan of people who can constantly improve. And it is, it's the next big thing coming to the US, and it's picked up a lot. I'm sure we'll talk about it in Miami and South Florida. And there's a bit of a heat map now going on of other parts of the country where it's emerging fast. Hugely exciting,
Yeah.
trend.
Yeah, because I was watching videos of it. I didn't know that you could use the walls. So I see these guys. Yeah, you're playing it off the wall and then hitting it back, and then just the back and forth it's cool. And like you said, I'm sure it's very accessible, easy to get into, hard to master. But you see with pickleball, I mean, yeah, my mom likes playing sports and she's athletic enough, but like anybody can get into it really. So
Sure.
um, how about from the like the investment side? Because that's what you were speaking about a minute ago. You saw some investment going into it, and what does that kind of look like? Is that the real estate? There's courts popping up because I saw what is it like $60,000 to $80,000 I think to build a court itself.
Yeah, that's
Like
about right. That's about
yeah,
right. So yeah, look, there is a lot of investment going into it. I think people see when people are talking about paddle currently, they're talking not so much about the professional side. I think that will come the interest in the professional side, and it's there in. So I should say that the big paddle kind of hotspots, Spain. It's the number 2 sport in Spain after soccer, which is huge. And you go to Madrid itself; it's the most played sport in Madrid, which is absolutely massive. So it's big in Spain, it's big in South America, and it's now in the last 5 to 10 years really caught fire in many other countries in the world. It was one of those sports. I'll come to your question, but I think interesting context is one of those sports that was kind of embraced during COVID in many countries, like in Sweden, one of those sports you can play socially distanced. So it became this big sport, and during the pandemic, and yes, people see the like financial appeal of it because you've got from a business model point of view, it's smaller than a tennis court. It's got all those things you mentioned. It's accessible, engaging. It's got a sticky appeal for people getting on court. The sport sold itself when you've been on once. People will come back. Uh, you play as doubles, so you can get four people on that court and monetize it that way as a club. And people are seeing these other opportunities of like, okay, well, if I can bring them to the club and obsess to paddle, they then want to talk about it afterwards. They want to go and have a coffee or a beer. They want to then get the merch. They want to like think about the rackets. So there's so many ways of monetizing as a club now beyond just like transactional court usage. So I think tapping into this idea that people are seeing it as a lifestyle and they want to spend time at a club, away from the house and away from their work. There's a real business opportunity there. And so look, there's an opportunity there. The investment is going into courts and clubs. Number one, I think in time, and you're seeing people invest and create apparel companies, racket manufacturers. There are court manufacturers out there who are, there's a number of good court manufacturers who are seeing the great big opportunity here.
hmm
And in time, you're going to see, there's the professional leagues. There's the Premier Padel, which is the global tour, and then there's the big one I'd say is Hexagon Cup, which is a big franchise league competition. Takes place in Madrid every January, and this is where you have a series of team owners who are famous celebs. So even Longoria is one of the team owners on the American team. You've got Andy Murray and Anthony Joshua, the boxer, on the British team. Pierre Gasly on the French team, the F1 driver. Lionel Messi and Cunagüero, the soccer players, on another team. So you've got a great competition there end of January in Madrid with these celeb owners, and that's obviously a big trend in the sport is celeb and athlete investment owners. The professional side and the investment is will come, but the big place people are putting their money now is in the recreational amateur side, and that's clubs and court builds.
Yep. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, with ballers, where I'll be tomorrow. Yeah, they have pickleball, they have paddle, they have yeah, I think golf simulators, but paddles right in the mix of all that. So yeah,
They
it's
do.
interesting. Yeah.
They do, and I think yeah. I mean, Ballers is big shout out to them. I love their model, what David, Amanda, and the team have done, because they are essentially seeing they're creating, and you'll see it, that this modern sports club, modern country club, if you like, where they're putting these these hot new sports, pickleball, paddle. Your golf simulator is a big hot thing now, isn't it? Saunas and infrareds and all that kind of stuff together in an amazing local building. And what they're seeing is like you're going to get people it's fashionable. I think I know in the US it's been fashionable to talk about pickleball being a threat to tennis, and similarly in the UK and other countries, people are talking about paddle being a threat to tennis. It's not that simple. I think you're going to get a lot of people who, yes, migrate from tennis to paddle or migrate from tennis to pickle, but actually the traffic will go in both directions. I think you'll get people who've never picked up a tennis racket or a squash racket because they think it's too traditional or too technical or too elitist or whatever it may be, and they don't like the environment. They'll pick up paddle. They'll know they can play quickly, and then they'll see tennis courts or squash and think, actually, this is probably a more progressive sport in terms of technical ability. I'm gonna test myself there. So I think you're gonna get people going from paddle and pickleball into the traditional sports as well. Um, which is, and per my point, Ballers is a great example of having multi sports under one roof, and I think you're going to get a lot of cross pollination,
Hmm.
which is super cool, and I think it's what we want to see, right?
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, the country club model is interesting. Yeah, because you're really just it's about the socialization factor,
Yeah.
somewhat, right? And then you're bringing all these, yeah, you're bringing people together, and then you have that infrastructure that can kind of build out from there, where people they'll go get a drink, and yeah, things along those lines. So,
Community is huge,
uh
and
huh,
I'm sure you've seen it in pickle, but in paddle, it's massive. People talk about community as a buzzword, but it's the good clubs, the very good clubs over the good clubs. What they're doing well is finding reasons to keep people in their four walls, and that's a great coffee bar. That's having good clinics for corporate clinics or for kids or students or whoever it may be. It's basically having tournaments. It's having a great quality lunch and smoothie bar. It's finding good ways of keeping people within the four walls, and that being somewhere they want to spend their free time rather than the bar or the pub or whatever. So
yep, sure.
yeah,
Yeah. So Ben, what are some of the biggest challenges then for you expanding? You talked about expansion into the U.S.,
yeah,
Miami, L.A., some cities like that. What are some of the biggest challenges from your standpoint in Paddle 22? Just
yeah,
getting the word out there to people. Like, is there
yeah.
any
I, I,
resistance to it, or yeah, it
I
takes
think
time too?
it's
But
I don't think I wouldn't say resistant. I think paddle. Look, I'll break it down to what I'm doing. Say promoting paddle PR and marketing. Yeah, the biggest hurdle is education. So, like I said, we're with a market like the US, we're building the plane and flying it. So we are um, working with businesses who want to tap into the US market. They know this thing is coming. They're convinced. They've seen the numbers. They know what it's done in the rest of the world. There's no reason to say this is going to flop in the US. Far from it. We're having to be patient in terms of like US is a big country. You have an entrenched sporting culture. There's a lot of other startup sports which are trying to make their name. So you're competing for airtime. You're competing for people's attention in a fragmented world where people are busy. Those are the pieces of the jigsaw you're working with, right? So, um, how do you grab attention for this sport that is an unknown right now, and tell people it's coming? Because, like I said, if once you get people on the court for the first time, not being kind of blasé about it, but it does sell itself. Like 9 out of 10 people will definitely want to come back because it's just so much fun. It's kind of taking the horse to water and letting them know that the drink's there. It's how do we do that? Like I said, social media is a big selling point. People see it, they're like, wow, what is this kind of quirky sport? Mainstream media attention still has a big factor, broadcast and print and online. People pay attention and they get influenced by what they read and see. So that's good. But the best thing we can do is get people on court and playing. So I guess the biggest barrier right now, to answer your question, is number of courts. Demand will be well ahead of supply in the US, and the supply is coming, but it takes time to build, and you've got a big country to fill. So that's the biggest barrier I'll say to success. And from a purely practical point of view, when we're working in PR and speaking to media and journalists, yeah, it's getting their attention so they see why this is a great story. And that story can be, why it's the next big kind of health and wellness trend, why it's grabbing the attention of celebrities who play it instead of golf, why it's a great business story. So we have to come at it from different angles and think, why should this be appealing to their readers or listeners or viewers, and why, yeah, just as with anything.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about that actually, the story behind it and the storytelling aspect.
Yeah,
How do you see that evolving over the next few years with short attention spans, TikTok, Instagram, people see something and then they just move on to the next thing? How
yeah.
has that kind of impacted how you're telling the story around paddle?
Good point. Well, yeah, absolutely. You're dealing with different demographics. When it's the older people, they're quite happy to read like a thoughtful, like
Yeah,
well,
they'll sit down and read a magazine or something
they
like
read the
that. Whereas
paper.
young kids are like, "What's a magazine?" Yeah, or paper.
This magazine. Yeah, what do I do with this? For sure. Look, it's different horses for courses, right? So yeah, younger people, it is yeah, it's the digestible, Instagrammable, TikTok quick clips of, and actually Paddle does itself quite well. And you've seen it on Instagram, but just those quick clips of like people. I don't know if you've seen running out of the court, the pro players. It's nuts. So yeah, if you see that, it's actually quite sellable, I'd say. Yeah, for younger audiences, that's the kind of thing that's going to make it appealing. I think yeah, older audiences is like, yeah, they'll sit down and see a TV segment. They'll read about it. They'll have kind of, yeah, a slower digest, I suppose, of it. So it's all those things. Um, I would say again, like if I'm looking at younger people, one of the big things is like getting them to experience the sport. So a big thing we talk about with paddle in the UK, where I'd say 2 or 3 years ahead of the US, is paddle is this big matchmaking cultural trend we're seeing. Actually, not trend, more of a kind of phenomenon in a way. Like, say, with paddle, you need four people. The biggest headache to paddle, the biggest barrier to paddle is finding your four people. We're all busy. Assembling four
Mhm.
people for a game every time is like, you need an administrator to help you. So there's a great app called Playtomic, which does the vast majority of bookings. So it's a court booking app, but the big kind of function it has, and this is the big play of paddle, is the matchmaking side. So they've got a thing called open play, and that's essentially, once you've got a rating on this app, the more you play, the more your rating, and the algorithm figures it out. You're going to get match made with random and strangers who are good to get on court alongside. So it's essentially a way of pulling people together to play a game of paddle, even if you don't know them. That's step one. But the step two of the case study we're seeing is these people are then coming off court and becoming friends. They're hooking up and becoming romantic partners. They're becoming business partners. So you're seeing it actually affect people's lives, and they're like, "We met through paddle." And this is the big story, right, of where it becomes more than a sport. Is people are saying actually like, it's affected my life because my whole social circle is now paddle. That I'm not going to the pub or the bar anymore. I'm actually doing something healthy, and that's where I spend my time. So that's what you're seeing in the UK, and that's where I think the big appeal of paddle is. It's a way of bringing people together, which is huge. And that, to come back to your question, I think is going to be the deep thing the sport does for people, is that like, okay, it becomes the new dating for young people or whatever. And I'm seeing that in the UK, and I think you're going to see that in the US as well.
Hmm. Very
Um,
cool. Yeah,
so
you
quite
could
quite cool.
get
Yeah.
yeah, you get some dates after playing this after playing a game of paddle. What I'm wondering too. What would have been some of the biggest? This might be an ignorant question here, but like some of the biggest cultural differences in growing it in the UK versus the US. Like, is there? Yeah, I don't know. Just in general from your experience,
Yeah,
dealing with developers and people over here.
well, do you know, there's more similarities than I care to admit. There's in the UK we have you have a lot of red tape around the planning system around building, and getting plan. We call it planning permission. You guys, I think, call it permitting, and it's state by state, right? But it is it's a big it's been a big drag in the UK for the sport. The sport's growing rapidly now, but it would have grown faster had it not been for such strict planning laws. So maybe that's a good thing in that it doesn't grow too unsustainably. But I'm seeing in the US, again, it's state by state, but in some states it's a similar thing where you've got the ambition, you've got the money, you've got the enthusiasm, these entrepreneurs who are impatient people by and large. and yet they can't change the law overnight. So you're dealing with these laws which are kind of really slow in terms of getting your permissions for building. So that, I would say, is actually a similarity. Um, the main difference is just the time and the different speeds at which we're going. Or the UK is, like I say, 2 or 3 years ahead of the US. So there's more. I read a study recently of there being like 40% awareness of paddle in the UK in the population. I'm pretty sure that's jumped by a big percentage in the last year. So we're at this kind of hockey stick growth now, where people are just familiar with paddle and they've heard about it in the media and they've seen it and they've seen courts, you know, and the US, that we're not there yet. So I'll just say the different stages we're at, the main difference. Interestingly, like the UK it got labeled like the most social paddle nation in the world this year. And what they meant by that was coming back to this open play format. You got people going through this technology app, basically, playing with strangers, which a lot of people think of Brits as like they're not they're going to be a bit reticent and a bit more kind of like shy, I guess. But here they are, just like jumping onto court with people they never met and becoming a hugely social kind of interactive population through paddle. So that was really interesting seeing that, because a lot of if you go on the tube or the underground in London, people don't speak to each other, yet they're kind of jumping onto court with someone they've never met. So things like that I'm finding really interesting. I think in the US, I wouldn't doubt for a second that's not going to happen. You guys are much more bullish about these things. So I think that might be another similarity we see as people, being really social. So differences, just differences in the level of knowledge right now, but that's purely because of the two stages the countries are at with paddle.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So, well, what you're doing is doing a great job promoting it and getting the word out there about it. So, yeah, so keep going, keep doing what you're doing, Ben. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Just to kind of wrap up here, paddle versus padel. We were talking about that before we started recording. I've heard both of them. Why is it pronounced it differently? What's the story there?
That's a really good point, actually, and this is we just come off the back of this big tournament we held in London called the Anglo American Cup, which was Britain against America at paddle, which was a massive success, and we're actually coming to the States next year for it's very much a Ryder Cup of paddle, big success, and we're excited to come to the US. I mentioned that because we did some advanced media before the competition, and one of the questions was this padel over paddle thing that kept coming up, because it's a big thing in America of people calling it padel versus paddle. So look, strictly speaking, paddle is the right name. In the US, there is as you all know, many people will know, particularly in the Northeast, a sport called platform tennis, which is nicknamed to many is paddle, PADDLE, I believe. So somewhere along the way in the last few years, someone or a few people thought they'd try and distinguish platform tennis and its nickname from the incoming sport that we call paddle by calling our sport padel. And here we are with these two kind of two different interpretations of how to pronounce it. Speak to vast majority of people, they'll say paddle. So I'm saying that's what's going to stick. That's what's going to prevail. But there's been, I don't know if it was to not cause offense or just to try and separate it from platform tennis. Some decided to say padel, but I'm going to set the record straight here and say let's ditch that one and go paddle.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
On the post game podcast, you heard it here. It is paddle. It is not
It is
padel.
paddle.
So there you go. All right, Ben. So what else? Yeah, what are you most excited about over the next year or 2 years here with paddle?
Wow. I'm hugely pumped about bringing just the competition I just mentioned, the Anglo American Cup, to the States. Again, this was a first year competition. We had 32 Brits, 32 Americans play out Ryder Cup format, and I want to say we really smashed it. We did something totally different. We played on this rich sporting history and rivalry between Britain and America. That's been the America's Davis Ryder Cup for many years. Obviously the riders evolved, but it all started Britain and America, and we wanted to do that for paddle. So super pumped about bringing that to the States October next year. And more broadly, I'm really excited about the growth of the sport in the US. Like I said, the heat map is South Florida, it's Texas, it's New Jersey, New York, and it's California is starting to move South California now. I'm massively buoyant about how this sport is going to grow. I think it grew in the last year 50, 51%. I read, and there's going to be a huge number of courts. By the end of the decade, I'm confident of that. It's something which is really on the route, and people are going to hear more and more about it. Hopefully, they'll be intrigued listening into this if they haven't, and soon enough they'll come back to this and be like, I knew it was coming. That's what we all think and hope in paddle, and I'm massively excited about its
Yeah.
journey.
Oh man. Well, it's definitely cool, Ben. And you got to get I don't know how you get people's hands on that report that I was reading through, but yeah, you see some of those names. I'm a baseball fan too, so you see Derek Jeter down in, I think it was Miami, who was involved in it. And yeah, so I don't know. Pickleball seemingly came out of nowhere, and now there's a pickleball courts every couple miles around here. It's crazy. So if
And
yeah, that word continues to spread about paddle, and yeah, it is social. Like you're talking about the health and wellness movement. I feel like that that's really happened here over the last few years. Like the cold plunges, the saunas. It seems like it fits
for
into that
sure.
realm a little bit too.
I
So
think
it's
if you
cool.
take, if you take one thing from paddle, I would say it is a sport of its time. In that, post pandemic, we all know people wanted to socialize more and get back to kind of basic human relationships. They
Mhm.
want, coincided with people wanting to be more healthy and spend less time drinking and more time exercising and eating well and all these trends. And paddle is the embodiment of that. You look at good paddle clubs; they are creating great community cohesion with people. They're putting in facilities like those infrared saunas, like the cold plunges. They're selling healthy food, and they're creating places that people want to spend their life away from work and home. So it's very much a sport of its time. It's a modern sport. It's inclusive, accessible, all these things we talked about. So I think it's and you'll see it. You'll see it at Ballers. It's the perfect symbol of that. So yeah,
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking it out, and hopefully I can get on the court there for a couple minutes. We'll see. So
really
cool,
good stuff.
cool, man. Well, thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it, and yeah, it's cool what you're doing. Just getting out there and spreading the word about this an emerging sport. It's got to be fun. Just being at the yeah, it's got to be fun and a little bit just like uncertain. I'm sure all the time too. With like, all right, this is coming, but when is it going to come?
It's both.
Yeah,
It's both. Yeah,
for sure.
exactly. It's both of those, but really fun to be part of. First time in my life to have something like this, which is novel. And yeah, loving the work everyone is doing and spreading the gospel.
Awesome, man. Well, real quick, but where can people find you? Where can people learn more about Paddle 22? If you
Yeah,
wouldn't mind
sure.
sharing.
So yeah, my business website, paddle22.com. Yeah, please take a look and get in touch. And Instagram, I'm the Paddle PR, and yeah, find me there and get in touch. I'm happy to talk to anyone about this sport and why they should get involved.
Awesome. Good deal, Ben. Well, thanks again, man. Thanks for joining me. This is great.
Pleasure.